Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Talking Disney Classics podcast. And this is the show where we love talking about the Disney canon. And we love having our friends on to hear about their favorites, what they love. And so this is going to be another one of those episodes. It's going to be super fun. And I am film critic Rachel Wagner. Stanford's here.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing good. This is our 99th episode. Can you believe it?
I can't believe it, Rachel. What in the world?
Yeah. And it's going to be a super good one because we have our friend Kyle O is here. And Kyle, we have interacted so much over the years, many years on Twitter and other social medias, but we have never actually spoken. So this is so fun.
I know, right? It's been a while.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this. And so why don't you introduce yourself to our audience? Tell us a little bit about your history with animation with Disney, what you do as far as any content that you make, things like that.
All right. So, hi, everybody. My name is Kyle O. You might know me as Kyle Cosmic Deluxo elsewhere. I'm an artist, work digitally and traditionally, and I'm also in creation of a comic and such, and all kinds of other things. I have a long history with animation, and I would pretty much say that some of the Disney animated features, when I had seen them at a young age, were so formative for me that it basically set me on the path I'm on now in turning drawings into stories and all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Was it something that you watched a lot when you were a kid growing up, a lot of Disney animated films?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a particular favorite, like that you watched a lot as a kid?
So, as a kid, one of my formative films, I always like to call back to this one, Jungle Book.
Yeah.
And
it's a classic.
Absolutely. And the thing about that was I had the second VHS release, which had the behind the scenes special at the end of it.
Oh, cool. Okay.
More or less told me, yeah, you can actually turn those drawings you make into stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have you actually been able to make like some of your own animation?
I've actually animated a handful of times, though. I'm more of a storyteller than I am an animator, but I did give it the old college try.
Yeah. What do you think's the value in watching the entire canon, even like the rougher eras? What do you think?
For me, how do I put this? For me, and this is just sort of a me thing, the way I look at animation, any studio, I try to look at it more as a filmmaker thing than a studio thing. And with each effort, I look for like what the directors, the writers, the teams, et cetera, were going for, what the thought process was, how they, particularly take on the task of making an animated feature with the resources and tools at a studio like Walt Disney Animation Studios, that sort of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Kyle, do you remember the first Disney animated feature you saw in a theater?
First I saw in a theater, I have this conversation quite a bit because I actually work at a movie theater, and sometimes it comes up, well, what was the first thing you remember seeing?
Yeah.
And I would like to think, based on a very vague memory I had, that not just the first Disney animated film I saw in a theater, but the first film I saw in a theater was The Hunchback of Notre Dame in 1996.
Oh, nice. Okay.
That's a dramatic one to have your first.
Sandy, yeah.
Like, the memory only lasts like 5 or 10 seconds.
Isn't it fun? That was when I just a brief period I worked at a movie theater, like seeing the kids' reactions when they come out of the.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Theaters is so cute.
I see that all the time at my job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember a little girl coming up and saying to her mom, I love Mario. I love Mario.
Right. You worked at a Cinemark for a little bit, didn't you?
Yeah.
That's the one I work at too.
Yeah, I did just for a couple of months. It wasn't a great fit, but you try things.
Yeah.
So what are you gonna do?
Got your feet wet.
Well, let's dive in. You had quite a few that you wanted to talk about in profile.
Absolutely.
And so let's go for it. Let's start with the first one you want to talk about.
So before I get started, the way I break up the eras of Disney animation is a little bit unorthodox, I'd like to think. Some people like to divide them by decades. Some people prefer by name, like Golden Age, Silver
Right,
Age,
yeah.
Bronze Age. So before I get started, this is the way I do it. I start with what I call the Walt era, which I divide into sections: the Golden Age, pre-World War II-ish, and Silver Age, which is everything after up until his passing in 1966. Then I follow this with the transitional era, following the years before Michael Eisner became the CEO of the company and everything really went full steam ahead. So I have this era begin with Aristocats, which was the first of the Disney animated features that really went through. It got Walt's blessing, but it fully went into production after he passed away. And I ended at Black Cauldron because that was pretty much in the final laps when Eisner and Katzenberg and all them came in. I follow this with the Eisner-Katzenberg era, which for me spans Great Mouse Detective all the way up until Pocahontas, which is the last one with, I feel, Jeffrey Katzenberg's fingerprints all over. Hunchback still does, but it was changed after he left significantly. So that's where the later Eisner era begins for me. Hunchback, and then that ends with Chicken Little. Following that, the John Lasseter Ed Catmull era, which begins with Meet the Robinsons and ends with Ralph Breaks the Internet. And then finally, the Jennifer Lee era, which begins with Frozen 2 and is ongoing for now.
Interesting. So you have kind of a leadership focus.
Yeah, like who was in charge and what the MO,
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
It's a good way to do it, Kyle. I love that.
Thanks.
Do you have a favorite era?
So I would say it's a bit of a tough one. I mean, the golden age of Walt's years is just so special to me.
Yeah.
Eisner Katzenberg Renaissance is what I kind of grew up on. Those were some of my first on VHS. Honestly, there's something in each era that I love and fascinating. But I guess for me personally, it's the golden age. It's the basically Steamboat Willie to Bambi years of the Walt era.
Yeah,
that would be it.
Yeah. Well, what's the first one you want to talk about?
Well, I like all 5 films of the golden age, so I'll start with Snow White. And honestly, I'll just talk about all 5 of them because I know we have an hour, and I feel like there's just so much between the 5 of these that just make them so unique in the pantheon. So Snow White and Pinocchio, just for me, how they used animation, especially at that age, to not only adapt those classic stories in the way that they did it, but also, how do I put it? Like, one second here. How they sort of married some of the traditional storytelling and fairy tale aspects with the cinematic language of the era, like Snow White and Pinocchio. Like, I definitely see with Pinocchio what they tried to do with Snow White, but like 10 times bigger, more multiplane shots, more elaborate effects. They built that whole studio to just up the game and get more features done. But what I also appreciate about those early films, which I don't often see talked about enough, and I feel like this spans a lot of different Disney animated features. For me, and I feel like Disney nailed this with the animated medium specifically in a way that animation can only do, how they took fantasy stories like these and told them in a sort of like dreamlike manner. The word dream often pops up a lot in Disney films and Disney songs and talk about the parks, but I feel like they hit that aesthetic in a way that's very unique and very special, and it kind of transcends a traditional or more conventional cinematic storytelling language, if that makes any sense. That sort of thing. So I feel like when you look at Snow White, it's definitely a mixture of those elements with that of a 80-something minute film circa 1937, the year it was released. And I like how I've always liked how it balanced like the sweeter moments with the more dark and like foreboding stuff. Like, that's one of the big things about Golden Age Disney. Like, there's a sort of, as the cool people say, it goes hard in that department and really goes ham with some of the dark stuff. But there's a lot of the emotional and sweet and funny stuff. It's like a good, especially in Snow White, which again, 83-minute movie, just almost pretty much perfect balance, paced so well. And then Pinocchio, it's that, but made even more epic in scope, I feel. That's
Well,
sort
and
of
I'm just always struck with how bold all of those films are, that there just wasn't like, it would have been so easy to just kind of remake Snow White over and over again once you have a success. It's so tempting to do that, but each one is just so different and so bold.
It kind of goes back to supposedly there was a quote that Walt said when they made the Three Little Pigs Silly Symphony short, and then they made like a couple of sequels to that didn't do as
Uh-huh.
well. And that Walt supposedly told the team, well, you know what? You can't talk pigs with pigs. And I feel like he applied this sort of mindset, can't talk dwarves with dwarves. So we'll try puppets next, and we'll try classical music next, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like a completely different exercise or a completely different theme or story each feature in, which again, it makes the golden age like so special to me. So then you go from Snow White and Pinocchio, adaptations of European fantasy tales, to Fantasia. Oh, I could just go on and on about just the concept of Fantasia alone. Like, think about making that today. 2 hours of an animated anthology set to pieces of classical music, and their interpretations by the artists, not so much the suggested interpretation, which makes them even more like, back then that was apparently like there were classical enthusiasts that looked at this like, how could you set that music to that imagery? But in a way, it's like this is someone's unique interpretation upon hearing a piece of music. And that's another, like, it's almost like a testament to the creativity of both animation and just the human spirit when they find something that inspires them. Like, that's literally me with almost all the songs in my collection.
Are you a fan of Rachel's reviews? Do you look forward to Family Movie Night, Female Film Critics panels, or the Talking Disney podcast? If so, please consider supporting the podcast by becoming a Patreon. As a patron, you get to access monthly events such as the watch-alongs and Q&As, where you get to talk to stars and find out the behind the scenes of the movie making industry. And you can pick what I review for Family Movie Night or even become a guest on the podcast. Podcasts and YouTube channels are expensive, and I really, really could use your help. I would so appreciate it. You also get to be a member of the Facebook group where we talk about all the films that we're seeing, and we have so much fun. Go to patreon.com/Hallmarkies and select one of the Rachel's fan tiers. That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
It's just unbelievable that it was even made.
Absolutely. And in the context of in the American sort of film marketplace, the animated feature being sort of an unheard idea. And everybody, of course, doubted Walt when he was making Snow White, the Disney folly sort of thing. Well, then he follows it up with an even bigger movie with Pinocchio, and then 2 hours of just concepts and themes and imagery and stories set to classical music. It's almost like the peak there, the zenith, which makes Dumbo, which is almost the antithesis of that film.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? Yeah.
We've gone down to 63 minutes in runtime, and it's kind of more like the Mickey Mouse cartoons and the silly symphonies of the mid to late 30s and the early 40s. The thing I like about Dumbo, though, is that you could still see a little bit of that Fantasia influence in there, and that I've often had trouble kind of expressing this because it's kind of a weird way I look at it that maybe I myself do, but there's like a cartoon surrealism to it that differentiates it from the fairy tales of Snow White and Pinocchio. And I think it leans a little more Fantasia in that regard. So it's kind of somewhere between Fantasia and a Mickey Mouse cartoon circa 1938, if that makes sense.
Didn't Dolly and some of those people start to like become pretty influential on the animators, Salvador Dali and
absolutely in the case of Fantasia, and even afterwards. Like, I'm sure you've heard of Destino, which was the short segment that they started working on in the mid 40s and then wouldn't be complete until 2003, I want to say, for
that sounds right, Kyle. Yeah,
the unmade Fantasia 2006.
Yeah. Well, of the Fantasia shorts, which was do you have a favorite?
Oh, favorite. Well, I really like Toccata and Fugue in D minor, but I also really love Sorcerer's Apprentice. I mean, that's the iconic one, the one that's
sure.
Yes.
but Night on Bold Mountain, I think,
No.
might have my bias here because I like the sort of dark and creepy and spooky stuff. And that's just like a whole like 7 to 10 minutes of it, just so beautifully conceived, and just some of the most striking imagery the Disney house has let out.
Stanford, which one's your favorite of this?
That's really hard. Frankly, it's really hard to pick. I mean, clearly I love The Sorcerer's Apprentice because, Mickey Mouse, right? And then it's just so charming, so well done. I really love the Pastoral Symphony, the Beethoven segment, with the whole mythology stuff. I just think it's just delightful. Plus, that piece of music is just, I think, so sublime. But anyway, hard to pick because they're all so great. Do you have a favorite, Rach?
Yeah, it's probably is either Sorcerer's Apprentice or Night on Bald Mountain. Those are probably my favorite. Those are really, really good.
Yeah, they're so good.
Yeah.
What a great film.
Let's dive into your next segment that you have.
Oh, before I get there, I just wanted to say the last of the Golden Age, Bambi.
Yeah, Bambi.
Almost the whole package for me. Everything Walt and the crew learned on Snow White and Pinocchio, but also Fantasia and Dumbo, come together in this sort of portrait of a life. It doesn't follow like a conventional adventure plot, but it's just like a whole life compacted into 70 minutes, and some of my favorite moments and some of the best animation I feel that I've seen. It's a formative film and a personal favorite, which I could go.
I was so lucky. I got to see that on the big screen in like March. Unfortunately, our Maven Cinemas, this was Revival Cinemas, now had to shut down because of a bad landlord, but they were doing amazing things for a while, a little bit. And one of those was I got to see the Aristocats. I got to see the Rescuers. I got to see some really great films, including Bambi. And it was really neat to see it on the big screen. Just the colors and the sound are so striking that was very special.
I think it's a magnificent film, and I just appreciate it more and more with just a little, more years as the years go on. What a wonderful film.
Same.
Yeah, I think maybe the older you get, you don't need like the plot to be so prominent. Like it's okay to just watch characters,
Well, and also, I mean, I just was always so hung about Bambi's mom getting shot, right? Which I think is such a, traumatic thing, right? But that still is such a key part of that film. But I think it's such a wonderful treatise on growing up.
Yeah.
Anyway, I love it.
Yeah.
And the art is magnificent, as you both have said. Yeah.
Well, and if you think about it, when it was happening, I mean, every family was losing, people. You think it was right in the middle of like a horrible war. Like it probably meant something to have a movie where, a major character died like that suddenly. Like they probably needed it then.
It hit very close to home, I feel, back at least.
Yeah.
Might have contributed to it originally flopping at the box office upon first release. Might have been a little too close during the war.
Well, and they spent way too much on it. It was too.
That too. It was a lot of things, honestly. Which really fascinates me. Like I love to look at the sort of cultural landscape that informs the age that the film is made in, but also the age in which the film is released in, and then how, as times change, maybe the mindset towards it changes too.
Well, how do you feel about these wartime films, these package films? Do you think there's one that sort of stands out?
Okay, so we've transitioned to the package films. I feel of the package films, my favorites are the Three Caballeros and Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad.
What do you like about those two?
Caballeros for the unbridled surrealism in the second half, just straight up explosion of Fantasia-esque, surrealism and imagery and musical sort of based, just all this stuff going on. And it's like relentless, especially like when you get to the final 10 to 15 minutes, just good stuff.
Yeah.
It's sort of like some people have described it as probably the most anarchaic Disney animated film, just completely lawless and
That's a great
Yeah,
way.
you got lots of Donald chasing skirt
That too, yeah.
in there.
As for Ichabod and Mr. Toad, the two stories they told there, like they could have worked great as features, but they're really good in compact mode too, especially Sleepy Hollow. Again, I have a sort of dark and spooky heart, so I gravitate towards that sort of stuff. And very bold of them to leave the ending of it up in the air regarding what happened to Ichabod Crane.
Yeah. Well, and they have Ichabod being kind of a jerk. Like he's
Absolutely.
a bad dude.
Rare sense of morality you got there.
Yeah. Katrina's probably better off.
Yeah,
what's his name?
Right.
Brahms. Is that right? Brahms?
Yep.
Is that his name? Yeah. He's
Brahms
better off.
Brahms is the classical piece.
Yeah. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's Factor Meals. Warmer, sunnier days are calling. Fuel up for them with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals in time for summer thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. Make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine. What are you waiting for? With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have new flavors to explore. Crush your wellness goals this month with dietitian-approved meals and ingredients you can trust. Make your day delicious from breakfast to dessert. Stay fueled with easy, nutritious options. Treat yourself to restaurant-quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon. Keep kitchen time to a minimum. Factor meals are ready in 2 minutes. No shopping, prepping, cooking, or cleaning up. Enjoy effortless support for your lifestyle. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat well balanced. Head to factormeals.com/hallmarkies50 and use code hallmarkies50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code hallmarkies50 at factormeals.com/hallmarkies50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Definitely check out Factor Meals. We know you'll love them. And I'm glad that we still have Mr. Toad's Wild Ride in Disneyland because they got rid of it in Disney World. Because that was, having Toad go to hell.
Yeah.
That's what you get when you're a crazy driver.
Yes.
You already got that in Florida, too.
Go to hell.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the next ones you want to talk about.
The rest of the Silver Age. Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, favorites from the rest of the Silver Age: Cinderella, Alice in Wonderland, Lady and the Tramp, Sleeping Beauty, 101 Dalmatians, and Jungle Book.
Yeah, that's some really good stuff you just listed.
Good stuff. Wow, yeah.
May I make an aside? Even though it's put in the next era, Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh is 2/3 from this era, as it is
Very good point. Yeah.
produced in 1966 and 1968, and then the final third is a short from the Bluth era, 1974.
And I love that Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh.
It's
especially I love the ending, the little that they tagged on to make it
say goodbye.
I just love that. Promise you'll never forget me. I promise.
Yeah. Until the next short comes along in 1983.
Yeah. And so I often say if someone asks me what do I think is an underrated Disney animated film, I sometimes will say The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, just because I feel like we as a society so often just dismiss as worthless anything that's made for little kids. That's somehow less, even though it takes like so much more to actually engage them and entertain them. So I really do love it. And I would also probably, I usually also throw out there Make Mine Music as I think it's a little underrated, just because I think to me, it feels like they were going around the studio and like getting everybody sloppy seconds. And I kind of like it because of that, it's like, this is weird. This is different. This is strange. Like this is, but
I actually have a sweet spot for Fun and Fancy Free.
Oh, do you? Yeah. Is that, would you say that one's underrated?
Yeah, in that context, it's not among my favorites, but I've always had like a sweet spot for it. Like I enjoy it whenever I watch it,
Yeah.
and there's stuff in there that I find fascinating.
Well, I like Donald freaking out.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Starved Donald.
So, well, let's talk about some of those ones you listed. The highest that I have Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, and 101 Dalmatians all in my top 10.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are
so good. I have the Jungle Book in my top 10 too. Yeah.
I have a Jungle Book at 11, so it's close.
Yep. And I had said earlier that Jungle Book was formative for me because I had that VHS with behind the scenes special on it. And that was the thing that it's like a core memory. Canon event.
It's a core memory. Yeah, I do have a lot of nostalgia for Jungle Book and Robin Hood because those are two of my dad's favorites. And so we watch, he loves both of those. And so we watched those a lot growing up. And I think they're both quite charming. You know, I get the flaws with Robin Hood, but as a kid I didn't notice any of that, like their cycle animation and stuff like that. I didn't care. And it can be quite funny. I think
it's a vibes movie. I think.
Yeah.
A good way to put it, Kyle. Yeah.
There's two characters existing, and there's some segments, and the vibe is chill and kind of folksy and fun.
Well, what about 101 Dalmatians? How do you feel about that?
Oh, I love Dalmatians. It's I think it's interesting that as a contemporary story, they almost made it like a sort of like a mystery adventure, and it really unfolds in such a cool way. And the xerography process, and just like this, just not just the scratchiness, but also like the art direction and the layouts and the way they did the color, like Walt Paraguay's color stylings. Like I could waffle on for like hours. It would have to be like 50 podcasts or something.
We'll have you back.
Yes.
I'm always finding, like with all my favorites, I'm always finding something new to appreciate with each viewing. I've seen these films like hundreds of times, which is saying
Yeah, I mean, I often say that I think that Roger and Anita are the most underappreciated Disney couple.
Some of the best.
Like they're especially their meet cute is like right out of a rom-com.
Right. Yeah, right there.
At the beginning. And I think that they use Cruella just enough.
Right.
Because most of the time the puppies are with Jasper and Horace, and then she comes in just enough to make an impact.
Absolutely.
So
never outstays her welcome.
Yeah, right. True.
Well, that next era, it was a tough time for the company. How do you feel about that? I forget what you called it.
The transitional era is interesting.
Transitional, okay.
I read a story that when making the Aristocats, they didn't even have the money to animate stripes on Thomas O'Malley. So they had to opt for him being a solid orange color and not a tabby with stripes.
Oh, that's interesting.
That tells me everything I need to know. So I have a lot of sympathy when I watch. And knowing that a lot of the money at the time was being funneled into Walt Disney World and the soon-to-be Epcot Center. So there was a lot of stuff at play there. My favorite from the era, as I just mentioned, Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, because I think it's half transitional, half Silver Age.
Right.
One piece of it was made when Bluth was rising through the ranks. My favorite of that era is The Rescuers.
Oh,
yes! There you go.
Smile.
They were really so happy.
Like the handful of people that we talked to that like The Rescuers. It's one of my favorites. It's in my top 10. I love it. I love The Rescuers.
Do you like The Rescuers or The Rescuers Down Under better?
I love them both for equally different reasons.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. They're both so wholly unique to one another.
Yeah.
And two different schools of thought from two different eras completely.
Yeah, I mean, I did see it on the big screen, The Rescuers. They had it at Maven, so we went and saw it together. And I did have it bumped up a tiny bit. Ranking. It's not a favorite of mine.
Okay.
I really don't like Medusa. I mean, I know you're not supposed to. She's a villain, but like she's just too much of her, and
that's part of why I like it, honestly. They make it so hateable that you root for poor Penny to get out of there. It's like a Lady Tremaine situation.
Who would want to adopt you? I don't know.
Yeah,
like, they make her go down that in that cave.
Kills her self-esteem there. Like it's so like Scar Schmar. This person completely reinforced the child's insecurities. That's so evil.
Yeah,
she's evil.
I just find the movie kind of a downer. Like it's just kind of means.
It is.
It feels a little mean-spirited to me. I don't know. It's just not for me. But I was good experience seeing it on the big screen.
It's a 70s movie. It's bleak, it's gloomy, and that's what I like about it, honestly, though.
Which just in general, I am not like the biggest fan of that sort of era of, I don't know, even though like ones like that I recognize are really well-made films, they're just not like my favorite.
It's almost like it's informed by New Hollywood in a way.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, good point.
It's a little more it's not as like dreamy or as fantastical, but it's a little more almost like grimy and real and kind of a disgusting
it's true.
work setting.
Yeah, you can see like Scorsese and Coppola and those from that like kind of era.
Absolutely.
I can see that. Yeah.
Maybe even some of the adult animation of that era.
Kubrick.
Bakshi.
Yeah, no, it's true.
That's when American adult animation was really starting to become a thing.
Yeah. Somebody was asking me the other day if I had seen Cool World, and I was like, no, I have not seen Cool World. I have not seen it. But that whole, you can feel that influence of I mean, I've seen other Basquiat. I've seen Cool World.
Yeah.
But how do you feel about something like how do you approach something like The Black Cauldron? Like, do you think it's interesting to watch, or how do you feel about it?
So Cauldron, it's a film that I can see the shades of a really, really cool movie within. And I still enjoy it on its own terms. There are some things in it that I think work when isolated. There are some admirable things in it. I think on a whole, though, it could have been a whole lot better. But there's a kernel of a really solid, like almost like a Disney equivalent of like a Dark Crystal or something like that. Or it's one of those 80s dark fantasy movies, never-ending story, just kind of buried in there. And if it wasn't such a battlefield production to the degree that it was, it probably could have shined as such. It was a struggle, as you probably know, between the more veteran sort of members and the young punks.
Yeah. Well, and it just got hacked to pieces. Like, we'll never know like what it really even was. If we could get the pre-Katzenberg cut.
We want the pre-Katzenberg cut.
Absolutely.
Rachel and I talk about this a lot. We really love to see it.
We don't need the Snyder cut. We need.
So, are you too familiar with Yesterworld Entertainment?
Yeah.
On their video on The Black Cauldron, they found the story reels for that version of the movie before animation production started. So it gives you an idea of what the pre-Katzenberg cut could have been like.
Oh, I have to check that out. I haven't seen that one of his. Yeah.
Good one.
Yeah. Let's dive into, you called it the Katzenberg era.
Eisner-Katzenberg era.
Eisner-Katzenberg, yeah.
So my favorites from this period are Great Mouse Detective, Little Mermaid, Down Under, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and Lion King. Mostly the favorites that most people like. Beauty, Aladdin, Lion King. Those are a lot of people's all-time favorites. And I'm going to be cliche and say it. Those are my favorites of that era too, along with those other ones I just mentioned.
It was such a good run. I mean, and it's so amazing because when I went to a panel with Jodie Benson, she was saying that when they were making Little Mermaid, they were boxing stuff up. I mean, this was the Hail Mary. It was the last, like, they were going to shut down Disney Animation. And it's just amazing how how it all, and then ended up becoming the strongest period, one of the strongest periods of the whole company.
I hear that it was kind of like each one give it your all because it might be the last.
Yeah.
Like, almost like trial by fire, almost like just put it all into this. And I feel like most of those movies, there is that, especially with Mermaid. I think that's probably why Mermaid might be my by an inch favorite, but because you feel the enthusiasm in that one, especially, you know, Howard Ashman, like he really brought in Alan Menken, of course, too. Like they brought such an enthusiasm to it that you hadn't seen in a Disney animated feature in a long time. It was like a Waltian spirit in a way.
It was the first movie I ever really loved.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it when I was 8 years old, and it's so sad. There's this theater here in Utah called the Villa that has a balcony, so it's like fancy, you know.
And it's gigantic, absolutely gigantic screen.
Yeah, huge.
Like,
and now they sell rugs there, which is just so depressing.
Oh no,
they didn't tear the building down, but yeah, it's like a big giant, you know, Turkish rug store.
If I ever married into money, that's the first thing I would do. Is I could restore the Villa. But anyway, that's where I saw Beauty and the Beast, and I saw Little Mermaid.
Yeah, it used to be like the kind of the home of all these Disney releases. Yeah, it was. I saw a bunch of stuff there too.
Yeah, wonderful. And I went to the Fantasia re-release there.
Yeah,
and that was
saw there too.
Very exciting because when I was little, I craved anything that was like grown up, mature. Like I hated like being a kid and condescended to, and so going to see something like Fantasia was a big deal because that was a grown up movie, you know, in my eyes. It was very exciting. So, but yeah, Little Mermaid. I mean, my sister and I, we would sing the songs and, you know, say, "Oh, I sound the most like Ariel. You don't sound like her at all."
Could have taken up a career in singing.
Yeah. And you know, they had a million bubbles that they animated.
Yes.
And you look at something like Aquaman, for instance, which has like a seascape, you know, kind of a thing. It's just not the same, even though it's real. It's, you know, made to look supposedly realistic. There's just, you never get the sense of somebody like splashing with bubbles, you know, like to me. And even though it's 2D animation, to me, it's more immersive because they took the time to do all those bubbles.
It's the human hand, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. And, you know, I'm so glad you mentioned Howard Ashman and Alan Menken too, Kyle, because they are, you know, I think they are such a key part of the Disney Renaissance of that time period. Anyway.
That's why I was so befuddled. I mean, there's lots of things we can talk about, this Spellbound trailer, but I just cannot believe that you have a movie with Alan Menken songs, new songs, and like musicals are so on the out right now that even Alan Menken, they nothing, not a word. Nobody would know. Nobody would even know that it was a musical. I just thought that was so insane. That should be the thing they're leading with. Like the person who wrote the songs from The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, like I just couldn't believe that happened this week as of recording.
Yeah, watch that trailer too. Yeah,
that was crazy to me.
I don't understand the thought process because this isn't a movie that's going to theaters. It's going to be on Netflix. It's one click away. It's not like trying to get whole demographics to get into the theater. It's like they don't have to write a musical.
Yeah, like why even have Alan Menken? You could just have anybody, you know, do the songs. If you're not gonna, like, that should be your number one. I would have led with that. Music from the
yeah
I don't know, crazy to me. But do you want to talk about any of the other ones sort of from this era?
Okay, I'll try to be brief. Great Mouse Detective, similar to Mermaid, there's an enthusiasm in it that really drives it, and it's like a solid little on the ground adventure sort of thing, and it has kind of like that classic cartoon adventure vibe to it. And of course, Mermaid, we talked about. Rescuers Down Under, I love as an action adventure type movie, and I wish it hadn't done as poorly as it did, because we probably could have gotten more movies like it throughout the 90s to break up the more grandiose musical event movies.
Right.
And of course, Beast, Aladdin, and Lion King. What more is there to say that hasn't been said? I recently caught Lion King for the 30th anniversary re-release.
Isn't that fun?
Rachel and I both saw that too. Yeah.
Even though I've seen that movie so many times, it's like I find something new to appreciate it, especially on the big screen. Just
it got bumped in my ranking. We're gonna do a new ranking. It got a bump.
Yeah, same for me. It got a bump up. I mean, I had it still relatively high, but that was just magical, really.
10.
I mean, in the best sense of the word.
Mm-hmm. What do you think of Hercules? I'm curious.
Hercules, so of the later Eisner era, Hercules is a fun movie. I like the Gerald Scarfe informed art direction.
Yeah, I do too.
Stuff is pretty funny. There's some good laugh out loud stuff in there. It's a fun movie.
Mm-hmm. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, Hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies. Well,
what do you think of this sort of the later Eisner era? I forget what you called it, the 2000 kind of.
The later Eisner era.
Yeah, later
basically Eisner. Everything spanning the departure of Katzenberg up until Eisner steps down at the end of 2005. Mm-hmm. So it's a fascinating era because once we get out of the grandiose musicals, we get like a plethora of movies with different sort of plots and different settings, some of them not musicals at all. But the thing I noticed in the recent years, if you look at Emperor's New Groove, Atlantis, Lilo and Stitch, Treasure Planet, and Brother Bear Together. These are movies that, interestingly, and this is sort of something I sort of felt when watching them, they dance with a slightly grayer sense of morality than usual, in that our protagonists, or some of the main characters who are ostensibly supposed to be good, actually do some kind of sort of bad things, or characters that are more complicated. Like you look at John Silver in Treasure Planet, he's kind of a villain, but at the same time, he really takes a liking to Jim Hawkins. The team in Atlantis initially is with the mercenary stuff, but then they have a change of heart. Cusco at the beginning of Emperor's New Groove is pretty bad, I'd say.
Yeah, that's true. For sure.
Kenai kills a bear and Jumba creates Stitch as a chaotic monster. It's not necessarily goody two-shoes here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, even Lilo and Stitch, like Stitch is kind of causing all this chaos.
Renegade.
Yeah, that's true. Do you have a favorite from that era?
So the favorites I have across that span of 9 years, my favorites would be Hunchback, Tarzan, Groove, Stitch, and Treasure Planet.
Mm. My favorite of that group, I guess that the way you grouped it would include Mulan, which would be my favorite.
Good choice.
Yeah, that's mine too.
Yeah, and then Emperor.
I love Tarzan too.
I do. I like Tarzan as well. But yeah, I have Mulan at 8, so this is my top 10.
Good one.
Yeah, I really like it. But all right, well, let's talk about this Catmull Lassiter era.
Right, so begins, I believe, with Meet the Robinsons in 2007 and ends with Brawl Breaks the Internet in 2018. My favorites from this era are Princess and the Frog, Tangled, Winnie the Pooh, Wreck-It Ralph, and Zootopia Moana.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good grouping. The Tangled for me is my favorite of that group. I just love it. I mean, it's I always say that I think it's Disney's first real rom-com, because most of the other princess movies, you don't really have a whole lot of romantic banter, maybe with the exception of Aladdin, maybe. In this, you have lots of conversations between Flynn and Rapunzel, back and forth, back and forth. And so obviously I'm a rom-com girl. And so I just love it for that. And I love Mother Gothel. She's just, to me, using motherhood to like manipulate and control is like such an evil thing. And then Disney would kind of beat that thing to death, the generational trauma to death. But for Gothel, I think it really, really works.
It's interesting that you bring up Tangled and its sort of rom-com-esque aspirations, because if you remember, Rach, they when they started working on this film, it was originally called Rapunzel Unbraided, and it was going to have more of like a Shrek vibe to it.
And you could tell from the trailers.
Absolutely.
The trailers were very like Shreky.
Yeah. She's been grounded for like ever.
Yeah. Yeah, I was not expecting to like it because I actually wasn't a fan of Princess and the Frog. And so I had been on kind of the Pixar train, but I had kind of fallen off Disney. And I have a sister that's 18 years younger than me. And so I took her to see it under somewhat protest at the time. I was like, I don't want to see this movie. And then I ended up loving it. Yeah. So
I love Tangled too. Love it. It's in my top 10.
Yeah, it's high for me.
As long as her hair up the list.
But I love Zootopia and Moana, and I can't believe that those two films were made in the same year. I mean,
yeah, that's crazy.
I just think it's crazy because both of those films, I think, are so excellent in their own ways, and they're such different films too. But I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you got the more traditional musical on one side of the plate, and you got the different sort of experimenting with other genres. Like with Zootopia, you got a little bit of 48 Hours, Police Procedural, and
Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really funny, and it had something to say, and it was like a modern day like Mother Goose story, like a fable.
Aesop.
Aesop. Yeah, that's a better example. And I appreciate that they were trying. And but what do you think about this Jennifer Lee era? How do you feel about? I guess you included 5 films.
Yeah, so Jennifer Lee era begins, I feel, with Frozen 2, which she directed and
wrote, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So ongoing, and hard to say because I've liked most of the movies. Like I enjoyed Frozen 2. I had fun with Raya. Encanto made me cry.
Yeah.
Strange World, there's a kernel of a better movie in there, but I still enjoy it as like a sort of pulp adventure. And Wish, which I saw recently, not too long ago, I missed it in theaters. It was very whatever on. I didn't dislike it per se, but I didn't really like it either. It felt like it was maybe a couple of drafts away from being something a little more. It almost felt kind of rushed to me, honestly.
I agree.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But
it felt kind of focus grouped to me. Like there was like an idea here, an idea here, an idea here, but like not sort of a vision of a story. It was kind of a mess.
It's interesting you bring that up because I've been having this discussion with other people, and the whole centennial thing, I think, really sort of, in a way, if this makes sense, like kind of robbed it, because when you're making a Disney animated feature, I feel like you're already sort of submitting your case. Like, here's a story that will go into a library of so many great stories. And Wish didn't need to be a tribute of sorts. All it had to do was tell a cool cosmic fantasy story that, did something new. Like if you're going to do a centennial that's meant to be a tribute, then just go all out and make a Kingdom Hearts movie or something.
Well, I mean, see, that's why I think it's a shame that they had Ralph Breaks the Internet earlier, because I think that one would have just made so much more sense to be this 100-year, with all the princesses and with all the, it basically is like a Kingdom Hearts, kind of story. Like I think they was just like a little too early. But
and I feel like it makes more sense in the context of that movie because they're in the internet and they literally the Disney website. Like it makes sense that they would all be there as a sort of like crossover sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Excellent points. I think when the end credits are better than the movie itself, that's where I just think Wish is that's what it was for me, because I thought it was dreadful. And so focused on those Easter eggs that I just felt like that just really brought the whole film down. I think you're right. That's a really great way to say it, Kyle. That really the Disney Centennial kind of killed that film.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like
except for the end credits, which I thought were beautiful.
The credits were nice, yeah, with almost all the characters from each film.
Yeah,
a couple surprisingly.
Well, if Jennifer Lee and the team there were to come to you for advice moving forward, what would you say?
Oh boy, that's the $1 million question.
Oh yeah.
I would probably be kicked out the next day. Well, for me, I would just do it this way. You have a filmmaker here and in the case of Wish, it's Chris Buck, or in the case of Strange World, Don Hall. It's like this filmmaker has been at Disney since like the 90s or the aughts. Let them pitch you the idea and trust them, help them a little bit, but not to the point where it's not their movie anymore. Like if you think of something like, like Lilo and Stitch or something like that, that is Chris Sanders and Dean DeBlois movie through and through. It's still a beloved movie to this day. And it's like, I think that's all Wadas. Well, not all, but I think that would help greatly if they had just let one of their star directors, if not all of them, just like, here, you have an idea. We can guide you. We can help you along the way, but make your movie. Like, we don't have to fit a mold. Make something really cool. That's what I would.
Yeah. I wonder if in a way, sort of Frozen hurt them in that regard. Because, they changed it like radically. And it was such like, as soon as they had let it go, they became like a totally different movie. And it became such a phenomenon that I wonder if that kind of
learned all the wrong lessons from it.
Yeah, I kind of wonder maybe if they did. I don't know. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, what would you say, Stanford, if they came to you for advice?
Well, I would search for another. I mean, not that you could ever replace them, but another like Howard Mencken Allen, Howard Ashman Allen Mencken team. Because their expertise with Broadway musicals really transformed Disney animation, and I think finding another really creative and innovative team like that I think it needs. I personally think that's what they need. I think that's one of the things. I mean, Wish had so many faults, and one of them was for me really terrible songs. And I mean, but that you can still have some good songs in a terrible story, right? So the story was, but see, Mencken and Ashman, particularly Howard Ashman, brought such creativity to the storytelling too.
Yeah.
And anyway, that would be me.
I think I would tell them to find a traditional fairy tale and to just not worry about pleasing everybody. Don't worry about all the different interest groups and the different voices, because in the end, like, you have to tell a good story and then kind of worry about I mean, you obviously want to be culturally appropriate. I totally respect that. But I don't know. I just think that, like, focus on the story and the script first and the music. And then listen to some of those voices, and have them come in. But it just feels like something like Wish, like I said, felt kind of focus grouped to that to me. And trying to please like all these different interests and audiences, and that's just never going to be the way to go. If they were going to ask me for advice, I would tell them to look at a lot of the Barbie movies. Personally, I think they have some really good storytelling, but I actually think the 12 Dancing Princesses, which is like a traditional fairy tale, but I think that would be a brilliant movie for them to make. First of all, it's about 12 princesses, so you'd have tons of merch and stuff like that you could do, right? And it's like a really fun story, and you could have some really good. It'd be an easy way to work in different vocal different stars doing the voices for the princesses. It's Like something like that, I think would be the way that I would go if they were going to ask me for advice. Is find like a fairy tale like that people, would enjoy. And 12 Dancing Princesses would also be a really easy way to bring in diversity, because you could have them all different races and, sexualities, if you will, whatever. You could have them be whatever, because there would be 12 of them. So anyway, that would be my suggestion. I think it would be good. But it's an interesting spot for the company. They've always been able to rebound.
They've been in these trenches before.
Yes, they have.
They have. So I'm hopeful. I've been a little pessimistic, but I'm trying to remain hopeful.
Well, I think what's hard is that there's usually sort of one spot that's kind of keeping things, going. But like Pixar's been having a bit of a hard time. Now the Inside Out 2 was very successful. But like Marvel's been having struggles. Like Star Wars is kind of a mess. Like the parks are it just feels like everything's kind of a mess right now. So, but they'll figure it out. So
let's hope.
Well, there we go. We did it. We went through them all. Thank you so much, Kyle. I really appreciate you sharing.
This was so great. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah, it's been so fun. It's something I've been wanting to do for years. We've, chatted on Twitter and off and on, and like, oh, can you come on the pod? And I was just so glad we were able to make it work. So glad. So if people want to follow you on social media or anything like that, how do they do?
So I'm kind of in the process of like migrating one Twitter to another. So at the moment, I would suggest following me at Cosmic Deluxo, which is KOZMIKDELXO. It's primarily my art account.
Oh, great.
And other creative endeavors and whatnot. I also have a YouTube and stuff like that. Lots of different things.
Cool. Well, we'll put those links in the description, and you can follow us at Disney Talking. And Stanford, how can people follow you?
On Twitter/X, I'm at Stanford Clark. I also have a movie podcast and blog. You can find me at moviespastandpresent.com.
Great. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So check that out. Also, make sure that if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. That really helps us a lot. And if you are listening on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and we have our playlist of all 99 of our Talking Disney episodes. And we're going to be doing for our 100th episode, we are going to be doing our big new ranking that we did one after we finished the canon and in our initial watch, and then we'll be doing our update. So that should be really fun to celebrate 100 episodes. And thanks again, Kyle. We really appreciate it. And we'll talk to y'all later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.